I'd like to welcome you to this Runecast webinar. My name is Stephen Salisbury. I'm a product marketing specialist for Runecast, and I'm very glad today to be joined by Raquel. Raquel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Steve. Well, hi everyone. I'm Raquel Campuzano. I recently joined the Runecast team as product marketing manager. I have experience in this area because I developed a part of my career as a product marketing manager and content specialist in VMware, and I have also experience in technical writing, and I developed that in my former company, Bitnami. So thank you very much for joining us. Okay. Well, in this webinar, we will explain what is configuration drift, what are the common causes and risk that configuration drift can bring to your organization, and some tips for avoiding having a configuration drift, by implementing an artificial intelligence solution that will help your operations team to have control over your infrastructure. After introducing these concepts, my colleague Steve will show you how Runecast supports you in configuration drift management through a demo. So in the next 10 minutes, I will try to explain as briefly as I can what we understand as configuration drift, its leading causes, and the risk that this can bring to your organization and to your teams. Okay, next slide, Steve, please. Okay, so first, let's begin with a general overview of how organizations are currently managing their infrastructure. As you can see in this slide, organizations' environments are getting more and more complex, and more solutions are adding each year to cover yet another new technology that has been introduced. What happened here? The majority of organizations don't have just one model or just one type of architecture, and their environments are more hybrid environments and consisting of a mix of cloud infrastructure and also immutable legacy systems that continue function thanks to the knowledge of a few people in the team. And sometimes these processes have not been properly documented. So this hybrid cloud, we can say that this hybrid cloud architecture combined with highly distributed resources amongst different teams is one of the main, if not the root, of configuration drift. So as Marcus Strauss, Runecast product leader, usually said, distributed architectures lead to distributed problems. So next slide, let's see. How can we define a configuration drift? This is a very basic and very short definition about configuration drift. But what we can say is that configuration drift is any system configuration that over time diverges from its established non-good baseline or industry standards. Why this happened? Because it is totally normal to expect that over time, an organization makes changes in both the infrastructure, in both the software, the hardware, sorry, and the software to keep their systems updated and properly patched, or maybe to adapt the system to the needs that the different teams may have. Configuration drift occurs naturally when these changes are made ad hoc, for example, or have not been tracked or recorded in a comprehensive and systematic way. So it looks like one of the main problems that we have for configuration, or that causes configuration drift, is bad communication between teams or poor documentation. But these are not the only causes that can lead to configuration drift. For example, as I said, software patches or critical package updates are a common cause of configuration drift. You know, applications, open source, networks often requires these patches and updates for regular maintenance or to fix an issue. In all these cases, these actions will cause a drift from the original state of the system. So sometimes they can, if they are not properly recorded, they can go undetected and obviously cause a major risk in the future. So another cause that we can see in configuration drift are hardware updates. So constant changes in the infrastructure, for example, as the organizations are growing, they are adding more layers or more system on top of the existing architecture, usually can lead to changes in configuration. And these changes in configuration also lead to configuration drift and probably to security vulnerabilities or potential misconfigurations. So another common cause is to implement an OC configuration, troubleshooting, or hot fixes. You know, sometimes a developer installs a package to test, for example, in a server, some capability or some new feature, and forgot to revert or to roll back the changes that he did. What is the problem here? That if that change was not communicated or was not reverted, then we can find that we have a data breach or a problem in the network in the future that will cause a major damage. So as previously mentioned, the other cause is poor communication in IT. As I said, for example, a developer changed something in the configuration of the server, forgot to revert it, and also forgot to communicate that to the sysadmin or to the operations IT teams. So here we have another problem in another cause for configuration drift. Also, if all the changes that are done in both the hardware and the software are not documented, or for example, the operations teams don't have a kind of a configuration management system or something like that to track all the changes, you know, sometimes this misunderstood or this miscommunication can also lead to drifts that can put at risk at your complete architecture. And the last one, but probably not the least, is lack of automation. You know, relying in humans is always not reliable. And although modern CI/CD pipelines typically include built-in checks for errors and tests, as I previously mentioned, there are a few cases that an organization are managing or are not managing their resources in just one environment, in just one system. So having a hybrid architecture consisting in both these cloud resources and legacy on-prem systems are very difficult to manage, are very difficult to keep it track, although we have a kind of automated tool that helps us to keep everything well documented and under control. So next slide. Okay, so to better understand the causes and the risks that configuration drift can bring to our teams and to our infrastructure, let's imagine some real life scenarios. For example, configuration changes hastily made. As I explained before, but I will develop the idea. Imagine that you are a developer, and at the end of the week, on Friday, you know, you are about to leave, but you have communicated that there is a major issue in a part of the software, or maybe in your infrastructure, in your hardware. And obviously, this is a problem that you cannot leave to be resolved until Monday. So what you are going to do, obviously, is trying to make all the modifications and all the changes that are needed to troubleshoot this problem. Modifies, for example, a critical security setting that blocks public access in order to make the system work, and forgot to document it and to communicate that. And now your system are exposed to the public access, and maybe you this change can be passed unnoticed after for example, 6 months that you have a real attack into your systems. This is very common, and sometimes it happens, no? So the other scenario that we can imagine is having a new application installation or upgrades. For example, a company wants to upgrade a business application in order to gain new features. Okay, the upgrade process maybe make some crucial configuration changes to allow connections through previously blocked ports, and you don't know it because you are enabled. You know, you are giving to that application all the permissions that are needed in order to upgrade it. A few months later, for example, during a security audit, auditors discover this misconfiguration. So here you have another configuration drift that can put you at risk. The other example can be opening a new port. Imagine that your dev team is working on enable a new feature that allows customers to use your service in a more productive way, and this will differentiate you to competitors. So in order to do so, they need to open a new communication port on our proprietary protocol, but they forgot again to document it and add into the security policy that this port now is allowing communications to the public network. This application or solution won't probably pass a security audit if you have to pass it in a few months. So again, you will find yourselves trying to answer difficult questions from auditors. The other example that we can put here is a privilege escalation. Sometimes imagine that you need to access repeatedly to a server in order to simply have a quick check or maybe make a simple change. Okay, in order to access this server, you have the admin credentials, but you need to double check these credentials in your pass tool, for example, and this sometimes is time consuming, and it can be tedious. Try to check these credentials all the times that you need to access to your server. So you decide to give permissions to your user group because you have the admin credentials to access without problems to this server. And okay, this makes your life easier, but obviously compromise the entire infrastructure because you elevate permissions, you have done unauthorized changes without communicating them to the proper team. And the last example I would like to share with you is hotfixes. Hotfixes, as I explained when in the first example, hotfixes are code changes that sometimes are done to address an urgent problem that can wait until the next release or maybe the next Monday, no? As I previously said. This is exactly what happened to Twilio in July in 2020. Sorry, when they were configuring some permissions in their S3 bucket in which they have hosted a JavaScript library that it was shared with some of their customers. They make some changes there and they forgot to revert the bucket to the original state. What happened? Some months later, they found that attackers could enter to that bucket and compromise a lot of data from their customers. Fortunately, they could identify it very quickly and they fixed it, so there were not a data leak, but obviously they took that into account and started to think how to avoid this kind of drifts with hot fixes, and how to establish a proper policy for this kind of last minute changes. So next slide. Okay, so in order to summarize all the risks that I have told you in my previous slide, and to emphasize the importance of having a proper tool to manage configuration drift, we are going to list what are the risks that configuration drift may bring to your organization. So next slide. As I said, we can find network breaches that leave the door open for attacks. I think that the Twilio example illustrates very well how hot fixes can be one of the causes that can open the door for attackers and for hackers. And also this leads obviously to data breaches. I mean, having misconfiguration, not properly communicated, not properly documented, not tracked, increase the risk of data theft or data corruption. So I forgot to mention that the way that attackers compromise the systems of Twilio was creating a copy of the JavaScript library, creating a modified copy that allows to steal the data. So as I say, the data corruption because of data breaches is one of the risks that you may suffer. And for example, IBM security reports that the average cost of ransomware infection in 2021 was about $3 million. So you can imagine how important is to avoid this kind of risk. So another problem that we can find because of these misconfigurations is downtimes. Downtimes can cause, the loss of not only money because your servers are not available for your customers, but also your reputation, because how can you explain to your customers that you will provide a good service when you have this kind of downtimes or your server suddenly stop to work. So related to data breaches and network breaches, etc., security vulnerabilities are also one of the more common risks, because misconfiguration or unauthorized changes to the configuration can lead to issues like escalation privilege, use of vulnerability open source components, the use of vulnerable container images. If you have not a security policy in place, you can leave your developers, for example, working with a corrupt image, or maybe pulling down images from untrusted sources, etc. So again, you are leaving the door open for attacks and for vulnerabilities, and you have the risk to infect your systems. Well, inefficient resource utilization and waste of money. Okay, if you have not an overview of what is happening into your system, of what you have uploaded or what you have implemented in them, you can obviously, for example, over provision workloads, or forgot those workloads that are not working or are not in use, say, for example, in the cloud. So this can lead to a waste of money. So this is another problem that you can have. Related to this, you can also find as a risk poor team performance, because when you have a major issue in your servers or in your systems, you will find a part of your team trying to debugging the problem without the proper knowledge. So if they cannot track who made the last change, who upgrade your hardware to the new version. If they cannot have a proper overview or the big picture about what happened, they will spend a lot of time trying to debug the issue. And again, this is a waste of resources and also a waste of money for your company. And I will last mention compliance issues. Configuration drift can lead to have your system configured in a way that they are not compliant. And as you probably know, data security is strictly regulated by standards and laws such as GDPR, HIPAA, etc. And for example, for this reason, for having problems with compliance, British Airways was fined with almost $230 million because their systems were not compliant and were not compliant with GDPR regulation, and they suffered a data leak because some of the misconfigurations they have in their system. So again, you can be fined, you are wasting your time, your resources, and you obviously are exposing your systems to attacks. So you must obviously take into account that misconfiguration drift is very important to have under control. So now it's the turn for my colleague Steve to explain how to establish a strong configuration management processes. And he will demo in how Runecast can help you or teams to avoid these drifts. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Raquel. You seriously don't want to see the next slide? You know you want to see that next slide.
Oh yes, sorry, I forgot the next slide. Yeah, this is the core of my explanation. If you heard from someone, it works on my machine, then you have witnessed. You can be sure that you have witnessed a real life example of configuration drift, and this is the result of that. Thank you very much, Steve, for reminding me.
No problem. And thanks for that great in-depth explanation of what we're actually dealing with, what we're facing at the moment for configuration drift, and what the problems are there. And let's jump straight in and have a look at how we can deal with that with Runecast. So what we're looking at right now is our configuration vault, just to show you where we actually can deal with this sort of issue. And as Raquel was saying, if someone's just jotted down the configurations on a notepad, or if you don't have this properly documented, obviously you need something like the configuration vault, which automates and uses AI in the background to actually pick up on the changes that have happened within your environment. But to start off with, let's have a look at what we can see. So we can see here I have two vCenters: Horizon, AWS, Kubernetes, my NSX Manager, vCloud Director, Azure, Google Cloud, and my operating systems. So if I jump in, let's have a look at the inspector here and just jump in and have a look at example for operating systems. I can see here I'm looking at my Linux OS. One of the great things here is that I can really get hands-on with what I want to see. So at the moment I'm looking at OS versions, and if I want to pick one out specifically, if I select this, that's going to show me, okay, these two are offline. So that's something I might need to know if I don't know that. If I select another one here, I can have a look at my Red Hat Linux 8.5 here. So it gives me a lot of options to be able to, dive in. And actually, if I scroll through, we've got the memory and the platform up here at the moment. I can check the statuses. So let's just clear these filters and have a look at the status here. So I've got 75% online, 25% offline. So immediately I can start to see what's happening in my environment, and all of this different information that's provided to me allows me to get that overview without having to manually go through and check. If we just have another quick, sorry, just while we're here, we can have a look at the OS, Windows OS as well. And very similarly, I can see here I've got 50% online, 50% offline, and I can do that same thing, select these, have a look at what's going on with them, what's really happening in my environment. So this really, really quickly gives me all of that information, like the whole of Runecast. It's all of that information at my fingertips, where I don't need to go hunting around and wasting time looking for the information. It's just provided to me here. As another example, very quickly, let's jump into Kubernetes. So I'm having a look at my nodes here. Again, I've got the information listed out for me. So I can scroll along here and I can see my kubelet versions, how many CPUs are running here, the memory, and it's giving me all of that data of, what's actually happening in my environment at the moment. But I can swap around here. So it's not just the nodes that I can have a look at. We can have a look at the cluster roles as well. And I'm starting to get more information and deeper information about what's happening in my environment. So by utilizing the inspector here, I can actually, jump around. And because Runecast is a platform that covers many different technologies, I can have these all connected here. I can jump in and have a look at my AWS. Immediately I've got insights into what's happening in the cloud as well. So the configuration vault is not just for one area. Every technology that Runecast covers is covered by the configuration vault, and we can really deep dive here and see exactly what's going on in our environments. So I think we should maybe, now that we've had a little view at the dashboard here, and we understand that we can jump around for different views. So, if I want to, I can have a look at my S3 buckets. Let's jump into some VMware. So I'm going to scroll up here and jump into VMware, and let's have a look. Again here I can have a look at my hosts, data stores, down to my VMs. I can start jumping around here and checking out exactly what's going on in my environment. So we've seen how we can use the dashboard to have a look. So for example, my ESXi versions, I can have a look at what's happening there, and I can see 25% of my estate here. So this is that will be this host here is on 6.5, and the rest of it's on version 7. So one of the great points about the configuration vault is that actually, if I need all 4 of these hosts to be configured exactly the same way, that's what I can use the config vault for. So I can see immediately the differences here. And as we've seen, I can jump around in here and have a look for the different information, what's happening with my SSH service policies. If all of my hosts need to be exactly the same, set up the same way, then I can immediately see here I've got some issues going on. So what I can do is I can create a baseline comparison. So if we jump over, so at the top here, we can see we have the inspector, we have the baseline comparison, and we have historical changes. So the baseline comparison, this is going to enable me to actually say, okay, I need all 4 of these hosts to be exactly the same. I know that this host has been set up exactly how I want it. And if I select here on these blue arrows, that's going to now become my baseline. So I can see here immediately the differences. So if I select this, for example, I can see obviously service tags are going to be different, so are management IPs, but I can see the NTP service policy here is on for my baseline, and it's turned off on this other host. So for larger amounts of information, we can open this up down here, and I can see my advanced settings, and I can start to go through and really get an idea about what's happening in my environment. What do I need to change to make these hosts be set up exactly the same way. Obviously for this host, it's on 6.5 and the rest are on 7. So we're going to have some big differences here. We can see that there, the different versions, different ESXi builds. We've got different BIOS versions. And once again, as I scroll through, I can see the advanced information that allows me to understand what needs to happen here. I mean, what needs to happen here is an upgrade, but I think that gives a nice idea of how we can start to achieve setting up our hosts the same way. One of the great things is that, okay, I've done this, let's say I've checked this in one vCenter, but actually my other vCenter, I want that to be set up exactly the same way as this vCenter as well. So if I leave this baseline here, I can jump in and have a look. Okay, we can see, I mean, we've named it obviously, but we can see this is on version 6.7. And immediately I can see I've still got that same baseline. But if I jump in here, I can start to see I've got some, if I want 6 gig of memory here, I've actually got 18. And obviously the ESXi builds are going to be different in the versions because we're on 7 and 6.7. But as I go through, I can see the difference in the NIC count for my IO devices, and again, the advanced settings. So this allows me to actually gain control, and we can, as with everything in Runecast, export this so that we can do full reporting on it. But this allows me to actually have a documented record that my whole team can check. And we can go in, we can work on this, we can create that baseline, we can set all of our hosts up the way we need them to be, and then hopefully we're happy bunnies. But as Raquel was saying, over time, change is going to happen. Someone might jump in to make a little change before the weekend, or it might be that we do an upgrade somewhere, which is going to make things slightly different. When we start to do these changes and we get this configuration drift, what we need to do now is we need to have a look at this and say, well, okay, I want to check back on this. I've set up all of my hosts the way I want them to be, but I want to check back on this and make sure I don't have that configuration drift. So we can do that with the historical changes. Now, what I'm going to give to you today is I'm going to jump into a version of Runecast that we haven't actually released yet. So you guys and girls on this call are the first people outside of Runecast to actually see what we're about to release very shortly. So let's jump into this new environment here. And the reason I'd like to show you this is very simply because it's not just about historical changes. It's not just about that configuration drift. It's about the what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability. That's the word I'm looking for. It's about accountability. So if I have a look at my historical changes here, and this is a very fresh environment, so I've only run one previous scan here. So I can select the baseline. So that baseline there will be the date on which I got all of my hosts lined up, all of my ducks in a row, as it were. That's the date and time when that happened. So I know that that's my baseline for what I want to compare against. So now I can apply this baseline and I can immediately see here. So actually, since then, I've got an unlicensed host. So I know I need to license one of my hosts here. I can see that at the bottom here. We've got 6 unchanged and 1 changed. So for one host, there's been some configuration drift. My good man, Evo, has been in there and done that for me this morning, just so that I can show you guys what's going on here. But if you have, a serious amount of hosts in your environment, I'm going to want to use these. I'm going to want to jump in and just see what's changed. I don't want to go scrolling through and through. So immediately here, I can see something's changed. So for some reason, my SSH service status is running. The service policy is on. And if we have a look here, we can see in the advanced settings, someone's made some changes there as well. So what we want is accountability. Now, this is not accountability for finger pointing. This is accountability for who made these changes. I want to go and ask them about this and find out why it was done. And yeah, it's very possible whoever's done this was doing some tweaks and they just forgot to set them back. So I can now jump into tasks. And I can see here that John Doe has come in here and he's made these changes. So I can see he's made the update service activation policy. He's started the service and he's updated the option values. And when I come back here, that's exactly what I'm seeing here. So this gives us accountability within our team. But, you know, the necessity for that, to understand why someone has made these changes, you know, there needs to be that communication within the teams to understand, you know, who's made the change, why have they made this change? And it may be that it was done for an incredibly good reason, and you might actually be starting to change all of your configurations. But it does actually give me that view, not only on the drift that I've got there, but who's done that. So that really does help me, you know, from start to finish with my environment. And as I was saying earlier, we can see here that actually I'd have to jump back to this other environment because I just have a vCenter on that new environment. But we can see here that it covers all of the technologies. So I can actually, you know, gain that visualization, understand what's going on in my environments, and not just from the overview here, but to create that baseline comparison and to view those historical changes as well, which really means that we can start to take control of configuration drift in our environments. So I hope that was very comprehensive and straightforward. I do understand we have 5 minutes left of the webinar. So Raquel, I haven't had a look. Do we have anything in the Q&A? And for all of those of you who are on the call today, if you have any questions, you can actually drop those into the Q&A and we can answer those for you today. But just a little bit of information. So I'm going to keep the Q&A screen open and, you know, see if anyone does drop any questions in there. But I think generally, you know, the sort of questions that are going to start coming up at the moment, I'll just stop this share and turn my video back on so you can see who's actually talking to you.
Yeah,
so
we have one question, Steve. Yeah, does Runecast monitor config drift in the real time?
Okay, so the way that Runecast works is that you schedule the scans because, for example, if I want to have a look at my security compliance or my vulnerabilities, I'm not going to be able to get on top of those vulnerabilities in real time as quickly as many that I'm going to see there. So if I have 20 vulnerabilities to deal with, for example, I mean, hopefully there would be less. Sometimes there are many more, especially when you first start checking your environment. But what we tend to see is that, you know, I have an issue, I need to deal with that. That's going to take me some time. So for the way that Runecast works, there's no actual point to be constantly monitoring the environment. If we're doing that, we're taking up network bandwidth, which is not necessary. But also, you know, things are not going to be changing that quickly in my environment. So especially for the configuration drift, we don't need to be monitoring that, you know, throughout the day, because that's not going to be happening so often. So yeah, the answer is that in real time, yes and no. It's real time when the scan is done, but we're not just constantly doing that.
Great. There is another question from Simon Jeffries. He's asking, how do you pull devices for the changes on the systems? So
as an example, for VMware, we're having a look at exactly what's been going on with the logs there. So I guess to fully understand that, when we're looking at VMware, we actually deploy directly to VMware. So you deploy as an OVA, and it's sitting within the environment. So we're actually polling that directly from the VMware. And I see he's saying IE SNMP PowerShell. So no, it's not PowerShell. I would, to be honest with you, I will have to double check exactly what's going on in the background there. I don't want to make any guesses, but I know for a fact it's not PowerShell. The part where we can use PowerShell with Runecast is for the remediation. We do have remediation scripts that you can run through PowerShell and with Ansible as well.
And Simon is asking another interesting question. Is Runecast agent-based?
So yes and no. So it's not agent-based unless you want to monitor operating systems. So for the OS, we do deploy an agent, OS query agent, but for everything else, there is no agent, no. And just for those of you, I understand we are coming up on time. If anyone else has any more questions, please post them up. We'd love to answer them for you. But what I would suggest as well is that for those of you who are interested in Runecast, obviously there's a lot more than we've seen today. This is just one small part of Runecast. So if you're interested to have a trial, please visit our website. And you can apply for a trial there. If you'd like more information or if you'd like a full demo, if you visit the website /contact, you can get in contact with us there. And depending on which region you're in, the appropriate person in your region will contact you as well. Okay, well, I don't see any. Ooh, is that one more question coming up? Does it collect logs in the ESXi layer and offer suggestions of fixes in crash situations? So yes, it does. I'll tell you what, I know that we said this was going to be 45 minutes, but for those of you who are willing to spend a little bit of extra time, I can jump back into Runecast and show you that very quickly. So there are two different ways that we collect logs. Let me just share a screen with you. So hopefully you can see my screen again. And sorry, I'm just going to turn off my video because I'm looking in a different direction and I'm sure you don't want to see the side of my face. So for logs, there are a couple of ways that we do this. So one is if VMware have created log articles, we can pick up on those. So I can open this up here and I can see this is the full text from the KB article. So the way that Runecast works is we have a proprietary bit of software which constantly scrapes the articles. So for example, with 6.7 in, was it 12 days ago, went end of life. You know, if you still want to be running 6.7 and you're not going to get that customer support from VMware anymore, actually you still get that from Runecast because we scrape all of the KB articles, all of the best practice. That's all actually held in Runecast, so it's never going away. For any version from ESXi 5.5 up to 8, it's always up to the current version. We still hold that information in there. So if you're running older hosts that you can't afford to replace, we can still actually cover those for you. So for the articles that VMware have created, I can see those here. We also, we also have the log inspector. Now, don't misunderstand the log inspector. The log inspector is not something which is a log collector. We delete the logs after 60 days. The idea here is for hands-on and speed, like everything in Runecast. I need that information at my fingertips so that I can just get on with the job. So we can see here the keywords that we've picked out and the issues. And one of the great things here If I know there's a specific host with an issue, I can jump in here and say, okay, I want to have a look at this host. Which programs are causing me these issues? So this is causing me huge amounts of issues. I get a nice visualization of that, and I've got the issue here right in front of me. So the idea here is, because we understand that it's, if you're using something like Log Insight or Splunk, it can take quite a time to dig through those logs. So the idea here is just to give you that information at your fingertips, so you don't have to spend that time. Which is very similar to, what I was saying about the log KBs and all of the articles, all of the security compliance that we're covering here. This is all held within Runecast. So if I have a look at my log KB, my config KBs, sorry, and I dive in here and say, okay, this PSOD, because we're doing a proactive scan, I'm not actually experiencing this PSOD at the moment. It's going to happen. But if I do something about it, it's not going to happen. So immediately, information at my fingertips. Normally there's that break fix where something goes wrong. Then I try and figure out what that is. Now I'm Googling it. And all of this is wasted time before I get to the resolution. Whereas with Runecast, here's the information at my fingertips before it's even happened. And I can deal with that. I can see here where this issue is resolved. One of the things I was saying earlier on, if I remember correctly, is about remediation. So we do have in certain areas the ability for remediation issues. So if I select this vCenter here, obviously I can select individual hosts, but it's going to give me a summary of actions of what's going to happen here, and I can generate a script. So here I've got the Power CLI script. And this is actually noted all the way through, so I can see what this script is going to do in my environment, or I can run that as an Ansible playbook here. And again, it's noted so that I can see what that's going to do. And the reason we're generating the script like that, I can see here that it's actually been generated specifically for this environment, for Vega 6.7 here, which is what I can see. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an overview of how Runecast works and what we can actually achieve with Runecast. The fact that it's proactive, we're putting all of that information at your fingertips so that you don't have to waste time going around. So yes, today was about the configuration vault, but if you want to learn more about Runecast and the way that we work and how we can help you in your environments, please go to the website, contact us. If you would like a trial as well in your environment, please, you can contact us through the website to apply for that trial as well, and we can help you out with that.